Today, we're diving into one of history's most incredible paradoxes. It's the story of the Mamluks. Imagine this, an elite class of warriors who began their lives as slaves, but rose to become sultans, ruling a powerful empire for centuries, right from the heart of the Middle East.
And that's the central question here, isn't it? It just feels like a total contradiction. How on earth does a group of people who are literally owned as property manage to seize the ultimate power and then hold on to it for hundreds of years? Well, to figure that out, you really have to understand what a Mamluk even was.
The entire Mamluk system, their whole existence, is built on a paradox. It's this fundamental contradiction that was, funny enough, also the very source of their incredible strength.
I mean, just look at the word itself. Mamluk, in Arabic, literally means one who is owned, a slave. So their origin couldn't be clearer. They were property. But this is where their story just completely flips the script.
Okay, and here's that paradox in action. On the one hand, legally they were slaves. They were bought in markets, they had no local family, no political connections. But on the other hand, these same men were seen as true lords. They held the highest military and political offices, and they formed this powerful, ruling military class with a social status way above the average person. So how is that even possible? Well, it was all by design.
So this brings us to the system itself. This wasn't just some random thing that happened. It was a highly sophisticated, deliberate process. It was basically a machine designed to forge the perfect soldier, one whose loyalty was meant to be absolute. The system was incredibly methodical. First, they'd purchase young, non-Muslim boys from far-off lands, completely severing them from their past. Second, they were raised in total isolation in these military barracks, converted to Islam, and put through some of the most brutal training imaginable. Third, and this right here is the genius of the whole thing, their old family ties were erased and replaced. The Sultan became their new father, and the other recruits, they were their new brothers. And finally, after all of that, they were freed. But by then, their loyalty was already forged in fire, bound not by chains, but by this powerful new sense of family and shared purpose. And the result was this unbelievable esprit de corps, this shared spirit of brotherhood and honor. Their loyalty wasn't to a country or a people, it was to their patron, and most importantly, to each other. This made them a fantastically reliable military force, for a while anyway. So you've got this class of elite, hyper-loyal warriors sitting right at the heart of the empire. What do you think happens when that empire itself starts to crumble? Yeah, the Mamluks didn't just sit back and watch. They stepped in and took over.
The middle of the 13th century was the perfect storm. The Seventh Crusade lands in Egypt, chaos everywhere. And right in the middle of this crisis, the Ayyubid Sultan dies, leaving a massive power vacuum. So who steps up? The Mamluks, of course. They don't just step up, they completely crush the Crusaders. They capture the French king, and with the old rulers out of the picture, they seize their chance. A Mamluk commander grabs power, and just like that, the Mamluk Sultanate is born. And once they were in power, the Mamluks didn't just get by, they absolutely thrived. They kicked off a golden age, one defined by some unbelievable military victories that literally changed the course of world history. Right away, they came face to face with a threat that had laid waste to pretty much every other kingdom it had encountered, a force that, to everyone at the time, seemed utterly and completely unstoppable. The Mongols. Hulagu Khan's army had just sacked Baghdad, the intellectual and cultural heart of the entire Islamic world. They were just steamrolling their way west. Pretty much everyone expected Egypt to be next on the chopping block. But in 1260, at a place called Ain Jalut, which means the spring of Goliath, the Mamluks met them head on. And let me tell you, this was not just another battle. This was a history-changing moment. The Mamluks completely shattered the Mongols' aura of invincibility. They handed the Mongol Empire one of its first ever major defeats. And in doing so, they stopped its advance into North Africa and Europe permanently. It was a world-changing victory, no question. And believe it or not, that was just the beginning. They would go on to beat the Mongols again and again. They drove the very last of the Crusaders out of the Middle East for good. For over 2.5 centuries, they were the undisputed masters of Egypt and Syria, an absolutely formidable military power. But you know how these stories go. No empire lasts forever. And the very things that made the Mamluks so effective in the first place, their rigid training,
Their focus on traditional cavalry warfare would eventually become their greatest weakness. You see, the world of warfare was changing, but the Mamluks, they weren't. Their whole strategy was based on these epic cavalry charges. Well, that's not so effective against the new technology of Ottoman cannons. Centuries later, when Napoleon invaded Egypt, their tactics were just torn to shreds by disciplined French infantry forming defensive squares. Their whole system was, simply put, obsolete. Their final end, though, wow. It didn't come on an open battlefield. It came in a trap. In 1811, the new ruler of Egypt, a guy named Muhammad Ali, decided he was going to get rid of the Mamluks once and for all. So, he invited all their leaders to a huge celebration at the impregnable citadel of Cairo. So about 700 Mamluk leaders, all dressed in their finest, rode in this grand procession right into the fortress. But as those massive gates slammed shut behind them, they realized the celebration was all a lie. Muhammad Ali's soldiers opened fire from the walls above. It was a massacre. Of the hundreds who entered, legend says only one survived, by forcing his horse to literally leap off the citadel's walls to safety. In one bloody afternoon, centuries of Mamluk power in Egypt were broken forever. So, the Mamluks themselves were gone. But this system they represented, it left a really profound and complex legacy on the region, one you can arguably still feel today. Their long-term political impact is fascinating to think about. See, some historians argue that because rulers could always rely on this super loyal external military force, they never had to bargain with local elites for power. And that bargaining process in Europe is exactly what led to things like parliaments and representative government. The Mamluk system gave the Sultan incredible stability, but it might have also stifled political development for centuries. And that really brings us right back to where we started, to that central paradox. The Mamluk system was brilliantly designed to create perfect loyalty. But by creating a class of warriors with no ties to anyone but each other, and then placing them right at the center of power, it also created the perfect conditions for takeover. Their story is this timeless, incredible lesson in the very delicate and often very dangerous balance between power, loyalty, and ambition.